We are making another bulkhead assembly, 705 bulkhead assembly that goes behind the seats in front of the baggage compartment. I'm excited. Let's get started. I'm going to pull some initial parts from the shelf. Not everything. I'm going to try and keep my workspace as clean as possible. And to start this, we're going for some brackets that are eventually going to hold in our harnesses. A couple small parts to make from this chunk of bar. These are just two spacers. We're going to cut two 1/2-inch sections from this. That should be easy. The little harder part is making a notch down one side, or a groove, if you will. That's 1/64 of an inch deep. Tiny little guy, 3/32 wide. Be great if I had a mill. I don't. I'm thinking I could probably do it with a steady hand and a file. So I got the pieces cut and filed down to size, and now I've got to make this groove, and the groove is supposed to be 1/64 of an inch. I don't think my camera's going to be able to pick that up. It's tiny. Everything here generally makes sense. My only complaint is that we've made these really precise adjustments to these spacer blocks, and then they don't tell you exactly where to place them. So I'm taking a guess and thinking that the center of the block here will match up with the center of this line of holes. That sort of makes sense, but it would be nice to know for sure. That has it about 5/100ths of an inch inboard from the edge of this bar. This lower former section. All right, I'm pretty happy with this. I'm gonna start putting holes where I really wish I had a cleco. You can see how it's so difficult to keep the garage clean. I got all the number 30 holes drilled except the very outboard number 30 holes. Those do not go through both of those bars, the bar plus the stiffener. So I'm gonna wait until I take off the tapered bar. That way I'm sure I'm only going through one of those pieces of aluminum. Now it's time for the larger holes. I have some concerns about a pair of those, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So my concern with these final number 12 holes for AN3 bolts is that they go through that spacer. They go through right in the middle. And I am worried that that piece is just going to helicopter in there as soon as I hit it. It's only held in place by a couple Cleco clamps, and I don't know if I can get in there any better than that. So there's a rivet where the shop head is going to be in this sort of triangular void. At least I think the shop head. It could be either side of the rivet, but it's not going to go through both pieces of the aluminum. So I need to pull off the top layer so I can drill those final 2 holes, and then we'll see what's next. I've got the left halves of all of the harness anchors. I've marked one, use that to set up my drill guide. Now I'm just going to drill them all. We need a 3/16 inch spacer. Turns out that's about 3 popsicle sticks. Next thing we're going to do is temporarily bolt it, get it running parallel with the bar, clamp that. Seatbelt brackets are in. Now, the only thing left with those for now is the outboard ones have some rivets that are very, very close, and those brackets are infringing on the holes. So we've got to trim those brackets back, and then we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, I gotta stop right here, because while I detail the error that I'm making right now later on in the video, I'm scared that if somebody doesn't make it to that point, I'm going to steer them in the wrong direction. So let's recap what I'm doing. I'm grinding the flange off of a number of the seat bolt brackets to make way for rivets or bolts. After all, that's what it says to do in the instructions. And there's even a frickin' picture of it in the back of the instructions. So, as such, I identified an area where it appears you would need to cut off the flange, and I did that until I later looked at a different part of the plans. There, it notes that there's a flush head rivet utilized so that it can tuck underneath the seatbelt bracket. That raises the question, why are we adjusting the brackets? There are some brackets that need to be adjusted, and in Van's defense, there's technically a rivet there. But more important than the rivet, there's a seat rib there that you need to make clearance for. If you don't adjust the bracket, the seat rib won't fit. Now, the problem is, it's a different set of brackets that need to be adjusted. The one in the picture and the one that I adjusted doesn't actually need any adjustment at all. Now, luckily I've been able to remedy this pretty simply, and you'll see how later on in the video. But if you're at this part, be careful about what you go chopping off. And one of the things I have to do is taper these bar doublers. Now the instructions don't say it, but it's quite clear they need to be cut down. So I'm going to start working on that. I know typically I would fab up some sort of janky jig or brace or something, but because the angle on these is so shallow or cute or however you want to describe it depending on which way you're looking at it, it's just not conducive to trying to do that. So I'm going to test my luck and just eyeball this and go by hand and then clean it up with a file. So within the first few strokes of this file, we'll see how straight my line was and how much work I have. A couple low spots. Barely. I don't think it's that bad. So next up, Vans has given us the task of putting a 4-degree bend, 15/16 inch of weight into a 1 7/8 inch piece of 0.40 inch aluminum. If all of those sound like incredibly precise numbers, they are. And I had zero confidence in my ability to do this. Undeterred, I tried a number of different ways in which I thought I could produce a smooth, consistent, and accurate bend in the metal. None of which worked whatsoever in the slightest. Is it gonna work? Well, if my test pieces are any indication, no, it's not. But I'm gonna plow through. I got a good feeling that the third time is the charm with this one. Realizing I needed some additional tools to get this done, I went out and I bought the most expensive tabletop 18-inch bending brake money could buy within a 2-mile radius of my house. Coincidentally, that's also the cheapest tabletop bending brake offered anywhere. It too struggles with an even and accurate bend, but it's a lot better than what I was trying with various bars and levels and hammers and clamps. What I found is I can get a bend and then I can slightly correct it with my hands. It tends to work pretty well. And I think this might be a tool that'll come in handy later on when fabricating various brackets and things that I will need that aren't supplied by the kit. So I fabricated a number of pieces. These are all related to the seatback support. And so I need to drill all the rivet holes and essentially get all these pieces ready to rivet on. Most of the rivet holes are either pre-punched or match drilled from those pre-punched holes, but there's still a bit of measuring to do to make sure that I get that match drilling correct. In one instance, we have to create the holes in a piece of angle from scratch. Now normally we'd use a rivet fence to space those rivets out. However, my rivet fence is still in the mail. So I'm going to do it the hard way with a lot of measuring and a lot of making sure that my rivets are spaced equally. So the good news here, after all of my measuring and lining things up, it happens that the end of my spacer here is right at the beginning of that 4-degree bend. So I must have done something correct. I was forced to do some fancy math and measuring, but I got it done. However, I have a solution for the second one, so I only have to do that one time in a row. One time in a row? One time. Well, now, aside from the hardware down below, this is the whole bulkhead pretty much assembled. I'm going to go through and make sure that I've match drilled everything that we're going to rivet that has not yet been match drilled. I'm also going to countersink some items, and then we're going to break this down, deburr it, get it ready for primer. Well, it's been over a day and the parts are dry. Now, I have noticed that this stuff really does feel like it hardens up over the next 3 or 4 days. But it is certainly, it's not tacky, it won't scratch. We're good to rivet. Most of this came out looking fantastic, especially the parts that I took some extra care on, the parts that are going to be highly visible. I'm extremely happy and proud of the result. There are some areas with less than perfect results. Luckily, most of these are hidden, and that's not a coincidence. There was areas that I knew I was getting a little sloppy with my spraying, and sure enough, we've got some sags and things like that. Again, they'll be hidden, and they won't impede the fit, which is probably the most important thing. So that's good news. While the pieces were drying, I had a chance to look over the instructions and notice perhaps some areas where I steered myself a bit wrong. But, as always, I found a boatload of excuses why it's not my fault.
Lucky for us, you've already heard this part, so we're going to skip on.
Now, I could easily go out and purchase some more of these. It would require re-drilling, but I don't think they're going to be too expensive. Before I do that, there's a chance that if I was consistent with my fabrication and drilling, a long shot for sure, but if I was consistent with it, I might be able to take some of these that were cut for a rivet that doesn't need to be cut and swap it into position where it needs to make room for a rib. So I'm going to hold tight on buying any new parts until I get this riveted together, see what needs to be cut, see if I can swap parts, hold some of these ribs up into position and go from there. So let's get started riveting it together. All right, so a few things first before we get started putting together the bottom of the 705 bulkhead. One, let's start marking out the rivets that we're not supposed to rivet with blue tape. That way we don't wind up drilling out rivets later. The second, on each bar doubler, there's going to be a countersunk rivet that we need to hit that's going to go underneath the outermost seatbelt brackets. So we can get those countersunk pretty quickly and then start riveting this piece together. Now, the very first rivet that we have to hit is the one that's going to sneak underneath the bar doubler. So before the bar doubler goes on, we have a rivet to set on either side. I'm excited. And why am I excited? Because I'm really getting a glimpse at what this color combination is going to look like. So, because I'm priming with the white, which I wanted for the cockpit, but we're doing it before I spray the whole thing, you have the natural colored rivets. And I think the contrast between the two just looks cool. Okay, bottom rivets done, kind of. All right, the instructions are pretty clear on what to do next. It's simply rivet the 705 bulkhead together. I'm gonna start with the top pieces of this, all of that stuff that we had to fabricate, and then I'm going to rivet this to that, I think, is the best way to go about this, and not forget that we do have some doublers in here too. I do believe that I have everything that shouldn't be riveted taped off, but I'm going to do one last verification of that. Once again, I love the look of the raw rivets against the white. I think it's just cool looking. Well, that's it, I think. I'll tell you one thing, the sides here really put my appreciation for the raw rivet on white primer look to the test. That is a lot of rivets, but that's okay. I do still like it, and I gotta admit, there's like a 15% chance that this thing winds up getting sanded down and painted when finally assembled anyways. Well, I apologize if I didn't get great footage of all this coming together. It just happened really quick. It was very easy to assemble. Everything can be squeezed. I only had to switch my yoke once. It all in all was a breeze to get together. The last thing I have to do here, or last couple things, is first drill some holes in my flap bearings so that I can get those ready to install. Now, they won't be installed, we'll just test fit them and then set them aside. And then the last piece is to install these guys. First, flap bearings. So I've drilled one hole. I have a bolt in there for alignment. It's pretty simple. I have that scribed mark down the middle of the whole thing. Now I'm just lining that up square in the middle of the second hole. I'll start a pilot hole. I'll take it back to the drill press, get it straight all the way through. So when it comes to the seatbelt brackets, of course, I trimmed some that I perceived needed to be trimmed that maybe didn't. Now, what I found is that if I take bracket 1 and swap that with 5, which is going to need to be trimmed to make room for a seat rib, I think this works out just fine. Now, luckily, I was fairly consistent with my construction, and when I mock it up, there's really no difference. The gap is still even from top to bottom, a perfect 3/16. Everything looks great. And the same is true about number 1. When I put it where number 5 goes, we've got plenty of clearance for the rib down there, and it's fitting wonderfully. In fact, if I erase the numbers from these, I don't think anybody would be able to tell that I had to do this, except for like the dozen or so that made it to this point in the video. Well, my shop isn't totally destroyed for once, but it still needs some cleaning up, so I'm going to get to that. I want to thank everyone for watching, I want to thank everyone for subscribing, and I want to thank everyone for the thumbs up and comments. I really do appreciate it. This one was great. I can't wait to get to the next bulkhead. That'll be next time on Ryan Flies.